Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams and I'm joined by David Hughes. Dave, how's things, mate?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate. I don't want to sound too upbeat because it's been a mixed week for Liverpool. So I'll just say, from a personal point of view, I'm doing all right. But yeah, I better say not too much more because I'm sure we're going to get into all that now.
Yeah, all is doom and gloom on Merseyside, mate.
Mm.
One draw has majorly dampened the mood. Nah, it's not that bad. We're still okay. We're
No.
still on for 3 trophies. The fourth is looking a bit less likely. We're going to speak about why on this podcast. We'll have a little look at Spurs, little look at Villa, talking points around those two games, and a look ahead, obviously, to this week's final, which is a nice thing, another domestic final for Liverpool to contest. But I think we'll reverse backwards first, and we'll go towards Spurs. We won't stay on for too long because Liverpool have since moved away from this game. But I mean, one nice thing here is I can give myself a bit of a pat on the back, maybe, because I did envisage a draw, and when Liverpool did draw, I think it was probably a justified draw as well. I don't think either team really deserved to win. Liverpool didn't really create anything of note, and it proves to be a difficult game, which we both knew it would be.
Yeah, you spot on, mate. It was. It was we said going into it, this is probably going to be Liverpool's toughest remaining league fixture. And did turn out to be that. A really organised Conte team without the ball made life really difficult for Liverpool in terms of creating chances. And then we talked about the threat, specifically about Kane, Son, and inevitably it was Son who obviously scores a big goal. What was a crucial period, really, second half, taking the lead. A lot less time to try and get back into the game. Liverpool did manage to do it through Diaz again, of course, but just didn't get that second goal, which we've become so used to them doing, haven't we? Really, we've seen it's always felt inevitable, but it didn't come this time, and sadly, because of the standards that Liverpool and City setting each other, you only draw one game, and suddenly it looks like it's all done, it's all over.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much an accurate scoreline. I thought Liverpool's expected goals on the day was 1.2, Spurs was 1.1. Liverpool did post a fair few shots more. I think, yeah, Liverpool posted 22 shots, mate. And from 22 shots, if you're getting 1.2 XG, that suggests that your shots are just not very good. What I mean by that is not from good areas. Not necessarily in terms of the connection with the shot, but just in terms of the shots that you're creating. They're not really the types that you should expect to score from. Liverpool largely dominated the game, especially the second half. And in terms of, I suppose, what Spurs forced Liverpool into, it was very much kind of a crossing game, really. Liverpool were just hitting aimless crosses into the box for a period, and it was relatively easy for Spurs to defend against. Bit of discrepancy in the numbers, though. I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts on this one. So Match of the Day reported that Liverpool hit a total of, I think it was 47 crosses, which was the most for us all season in a single game. But if you look at FBref using StatsBomb's numbers, Liverpool hit 21, which is that's a serious difference. That's like half the figure, half the total. Sorry, and 21 wouldn't even be enough to be Liverpool's most this season. Liverpool have hit more crosses in a fair few matches than 21. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. That's a bit of a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I think it all comes down to definitions, doesn't it? Because while you were talking, then I had a quick look on to see what Y Scouts has it down as, and they've got 37. So, I think what inevitably happens is it'll just be definition, won't it? But I'd be more inclined to maybe lean more on StatsBomb / FBref's numbers. I'm not saying they're always right, and we don't know, do we? Unless you go and check everything, but they do tend to be there or thereabouts and considered kind of one of the market leaders, or if not the market leader. So yeah, it's I mean the reality is, Josh, it doesn't change too much, does it? That it was a kind of frustrating trait from a Liverpool perspective that they were forced into a lot of kind of hitting up crosses and also, you know, hitting up shots, really, not able to get close enough to the goal to create enough, you know, clear-cut chances and kind of hitting from distance and hoping that, you know, one finds the corner. I suppose you can make a case that that's how they got back into the game, you know, deflected shot. It can work in your favour, but that doesn't tend to happen too many times.
Yeah. I mean, I must say, on the back of the performance, I don't think Salah was particularly good. I think his decision making in certain moments was horrendous, mate. And I think sometimes that can be a product of just tiredness, really, and you know, playing so often. And we've said before that I think out of Liverpool's front line, he's probably the most indispensable, maybe, in terms of his profile, simply because he's the only one of them who's left-footed. So he probably has to play the most minutes out of them all. And, you know, you've got to factor in what happened with AFCON, things like that. Since, don't get me wrong, he scored every now and then. But I don't know if it's just me, he hasn't looked as sharp since he came back from that tournament. And in this game, this was a bad game that captured what he's like on his worst day, maybe. Can be a frustrating player, and I think it was one of them days for him.
Yeah, well, he scored 7 goals since AFCON, but only 4 from open play. And so, you know, the 3 penalties in there. And if you think about it, before he went, he'd scored 23 goals. So, you know, it's vastly different, isn't it, really? And we're getting to the stage where, in terms of games played, it's still been marginally more before the tournament, but, you know, it's getting quite similar. So it's just been kind of 2 really contrasting halves of the season for them. And there will be obviously elements of fatigue in there, but I mean, you look at Mane and you're like, you know, he's scored 12 since he's come back, all from open play, and he looks really sharp. So yeah, it's hard to be too critical of Salah, isn't it? Because you do appreciate how much football he's played, and he probably is just fatigued at this stage. But it feels like when he's not at his best, his worst, can be a bit of a problem sometimes. You know, he can try and force things that aren't there. Not always the best team player, and can be a little bit almost destructive to the team's play.
Yeah, it just comes on the back of a video that I saw, actually, of, it was a Luis Diaz type video, Luis Diaz fan account type thing, but it just showed in this match alone a number of occasions where Salah had the ball, Diaz was wide open, and for whatever reason Salah tried to shoot or tried to do something daft out the ordinary by playing a pass that he just shouldn't really be attempting. But there was at least 4 specific opportunities where Diaz is in the box or around the box waiting for the ball free, and he just didn't receive the ball from Salah. And I think Salah on his game makes better decisions and probably finds him half the time. But it just didn't really seem to happen. Liverpool experienced a frustrating game here. Spurs obviously I thought he played okay, personally. You know, after the game, Klopp had a go at Conte. I think he regrets that a little bit now. But he said that he pointed out they can't coach it, and pointed out that Spurs have got world-class players and that they should be doing more for the game. But on the back of the performance, as I said, I thought Spurs proved to be more offensive than most opponents Liverpool faced at Anfield. And I was actually quite impressed with them. Don't get me wrong, they very much sat in a block. Difficult to break down, back 5 at times. But when it comes to when you're on the ball, they did get bodies forward. You know, they did spread the pitch out wide. Sometimes they had a bank of 5 across Liverpool's back 4. Wing backs getting high and wide and things. And the goal that they scored was really good. So I think on reflection, Klopp probably regrets that one, because, you know, Spurs were far better than, you know, Atletico Madrid, for example, in terms of the way they played against Liverpool earlier in the season.
Yeah, I think that just birthed from the frustration at the result, didn't he? You know, didn't it? Sorry, I think had Liverpool managed to sneak a second, then he probably would have been a lot more complimentary about Spurs and Conte. But it was a damaging result. And I think that obviously, with emotions still running so high, that's what led, to what he said. Because, I agree. It was a really, really good game plan, as in, like, well executed. If they would have opened up and went toe to toe with Liverpool, they would have clearly got beat. And there's no point for getting a pat on the head and saying at least you had football at the forefront of your decision. Ultimately they're out to try and get points, and that was a big one for them. So, yeah, but to Klopp's credit, he pretty much. I don't think he apologised as such, did he? But he basically just admitted that he was wrong in his comments a few days later. When emotions are kind of levelled out a bit. So, look, it is what it is. It's a really emotional game, and sometimes it gets the better of you.
Yeah, that's it. Shortly after, Liverpool obviously faced Aston Villa and did manage to get over the line after a scare. Conceded first, looked really shaky early on. Something was clearly up with Fabinho, despite the injury. Even around the injury, he just looked all over the place a little bit. Not sure what was wrong with him. But then gradually Liverpool come into the game, and the winning goal was scored by a certain Sadio Mane. Obviously, not since, I'm not sure if it was before or after, but he's been unusually linked with a move to Bayern Munich. And obviously he's due to run out of contract in about 12 months now. Same with Salah. Salah seems to be ahead of him in the pecking order when it comes to getting at least an offer on the table. You got any thoughts on this one? What Liverpool should do? How Liverpool should navigate this? Because personally, I don't think, even if they all wanted to sign, even if they're all willing to sign for a reasonable amount, I don't think Liverpool would extend the deals of Mane, Salah and Firmino. I think someone has to leave, but specifically when it comes to Mane and Salah, what do Liverpool do here?
Yeah, so my theory on this is probably earlier on, or maybe at the start of this year, sometime last year, they probably sat down, the club officials, and decided that maybe in terms of a priority, it's Salah. Salah's going to be the priority. He's a little bit younger. He's performing at a really high level still, which at times you can say Firmino has looked a little bit less important. Although I'm conscious to say that, because I think at stages this year Firmino has again proved his worth. But he of the three, he's probably the one that's looked the most dispensable. And then Mane is at times in the past looked a little bit hit and miss by his lofty standards. But I don't know, Josh. I think there's a fair case to say that the picture may have changed in more recent times, because you're looking at Mane now, and he still just looks phenomenal. At 30, he still looks really at the peak physically. Still looks really dangerous as an attacker. And this isn't a criticism of Salah as such, but maybe more those around him. He seems to have a lot less baggage than Salah does. I imagine if you went into negotiations with Mane, I think they'd be a little bit smoother. So I'm not fully saying that suddenly the club move all the attentions to Mane over Salah, but I reckon there's at least a conversation to be had there.
Yeah, it is a really difficult one. I agree with you when you say I think Mane would be more willing to sign if you. I think you'd have to navigate fewer hurdles there. And I also agree with you when you're saying about Firmino. I think one thing you didn't touch on there with Firmino is this season more than ever, he's picking up knocks, he's picking up injuries, and that's never been the trait of his. But this season, it is for whatever reason. Whether that's a sign of things to come, I'm not sure. Whether it's a product of old age, potentially, that sort of thing. Maybe a little bit of things to worry about, but that's the kind of thing you can avoid if you opt against tying down 30-year-old players. But when it comes to Mane and Salah, it's just tricky. It's like it's weird how things swing. And it's weird how much of it just stems from who is finding the net and who isn't. That's the crux of the narrative, really. If you look at Mane's last 11 games for Liverpool, and bear in mind those 11 games are happening virtually every 3 days, he hasn't gone more than one game without a goal. across the last 11 games he's played.
Mm.
Any game in which he hasn't scored, he scored the next one. So when it comes to what he's doing in terms of the difference he's making and it is his perception, let's say, it looks like he's suddenly become a new player. When in reality, for the full season, he's probably been playing to the same level all season. The big difference has just been his conversion. Goals do a lot for your reputation. They did a lot for Maxi Rodriguez's reputation when he was at Liverpool. They did a lot for Louis Garcia's reputation. Done a lot for Divock Origi's reputation. And Mane has always been well, for the most part at least, a solid contributor, but it just seems to be the past couple of months. It's not even the past couple of months, the past 5-6 weeks, he's suddenly able to find a net. And I saw a visualization on I think it might have been Sky actually, and it said something like Mane's last 11 games compared to his previous 11 games, he actually generated a higher XG in his previous 11, but I think he scored something like 7 goals. And in his 11 since, he's generated lesser XG, but has overperformed in terms of his finishing. So it's funny how these things work, and sometimes when you're giving these deals out and you're trying to assess the situation, you have to kind of remove the finishing element as almost noise because it can fluctuate so much.
Yeah, well, at the end, it's a constant variance, isn't it? Just constantly varies. You'll hit purple patches, and then you'll hit
that's it.
and then you'll kind of hit these barren spells. But yeah, I do agree that I just think he looks such a sharp attacker, though. Away from the kind of black and white and the numbers alone. And I just again, just on that point of the baggage, I just think he's got so much less that maybe if it's not a case that Liverpool choose to move on to him instead of Salah, maybe they'll just be in a position where it's like we're not getting anywhere. We've hit a brick wall. Let's make sure Mane stays, and that could potentially happen.
Yeah, I don't think there's almost any possibility where all three of them would leave. I can't envisage that happening at all. I think if Salah was to leave, which I think we will know in the next couple of months, I think if he hasn't signed by the start of next season, I think he's leaving. I think he's probably gone. At that point, you should probably be looking to tie Mane down as a certainty. And then in terms of Firmino, I'm not really sure when it comes to Firmino. He's the oldest. He's been at the club the longest. Probably the least threatening, maybe least penetrative in terms of worrying about him and him delivering endless goals and assists and things like that. So I'm not really sure what you do with that department, but it is a tricky one to see what Liverpool do. And considering Liverpool's recruitment decisions over the years, the gold standard, it is going to be really interesting to see how you navigate this one, because we have reached that point, haven't we, where almost anything the club do, you just automatically inclined to think, oh yeah, it's the right move. But this is one of those tightrope ones, I think.
Yeah. It's just when you were talking about Firmino, then I was like, he's gone from maybe being like the third best perceived finish at the club to the fifth now, isn't he? Really, with you throwing Diaz and Jota in there, so
yeah,
you're kind of fifth best goal scorer. I think it just makes you, no matter, we've already spoke so many times about what he brings to the team, but I think that alone makes you very, very susceptible to being the man who goes. And I said a few months ago, I think you were still unsure about this, but I said it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up going this summer, if someone come in. I don't know who he would, but
Firmino.
Yeah.
I
mean, he might not. But I just think he's probably dispendable at this stage now, and Liverpool could get a bit of money for him.
Yeah, no, it's possible. It's going to be interesting to see how things work out. One thing with Mane, though, in comparison to Salah, I know I bang on about this a fair bit, but I think it matters. Mane, again, is right-footed, and Liverpool have a few of these now. Salah has that edge that he is left-footed, and he's the only... Diaz, for example, played on the right of Liverpool's front three against Villa the other day, and he was just nowhere near what we expect from Luis Diaz, and his natural movements, the coming inside and what he usually does 1v1, just looked awkward because he didn't have those natural angles. Like, I'm right-footed. I play on the left usually. I know exactly what that feels like when you're deployed on the right and you're just naturally gaining inroads by almost running towards the corner flag rather than running towards the goal. You just feel a lot less. You just feel out of your comfort zone almost.
Yeah.
And I
You're
think Salah
creating
has that.
goals normally as well, aren't you, rather than scoring them?
Yeah, yeah, and you're creating goals with crosses as well, rather than like. Just got a message there from our producer, just in capital letters. Put him on his left. I'm not even sure what he means, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's an interesting element of Salah's game, and it's one that makes him probably more valuable than Mane when it comes to keeping him. Because if you're going to replace Salah with a left-footed player, Rafinha was the word a few months back. He's getting linked with Barcelona now, things like that. So I'm not sure what you do there. It's gonna be tricky.
I agree, mate. And I was trying to think, we've always assumed that if Salah goes, there's going to be a replacement who'd be left footed. But I don't know, it gets a little. I think that's a little bit tougher now because you've got so many attackers, top attackers already in the team. Maybe it's a case of just trying to keep Salah for another year, even if you're not going to have him sign, and then bring in that left-footed replacement. But there is so many different avenues to go down here, and that does add another little bit of another element to the Mane versus Salah kind of discussion, because it is important. It is an important factor. Even though Mane can play on that side, it's just a little bit different.
Yeah, I'm just looking back now at a newsletter that I sent a few months back, and it was a Q&A newsletter actually, and someone asked, if you're replacing Salah, who'd you get, type thing. And I couldn't dedicate that much time to it because I had other questions to answer and I had other work to do and things like that. But on the quickest glance of the numbers, incorporating left-footed players who are also fast, they have to be fast to play in Liverpool's front line. I come up with just 5 rough shouts, and those players were Rafinha, Jared Bowen, Bukayo Saka, Anthony, and Moussa Diaby. I think those players are comparable to Salah in terms of what they offer on the pitch, but none of them really at Salah's level. I'm not sure how many of them will reach close to Salah's level. Saka is obviously an outside the box shout, considering he's playing for Arsenal. It's probably unlikely. So it just captures the difficulty that Liverpool have got at the minute. One question I've got for you is the links around Mane leaving. It wasn't just Mane's going to go. It was a touted thing for a swap deal with Serge Gnabry. I think the agent is in charge of both players, funnily enough. Gnabry is currently experiencing similar contract issues with Bayern. Would you have any interest in that?
Yeah, I would, because I'd probably rate Mane as a better attacker. I think that's fair to say. But he's 4 years younger, and I just think that's a big factor in that potential deal. You could potentially bring a player in who's got a really high ceiling, who's 4 years younger. So I'll be honest, straight away, I'll be looking at that thinking, that could be an interesting deal in my opinion. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I am. I wouldn't rule that out. I am similar because I am a fan of Gnabry. I think he's a top player. I think he's stylistically comparable to Mane. As you just said, he's a couple of years younger. He's 26 years old. Been doing it at the top for a while now. Even has Premier League experience. In fact, not even sure. Does he even qualify as homegrown? Because if he
I
does,
don't
that's a
know.
big perk, that.
Yeah. I
Because he comes
don't
through at
actually
Arsenal.
know. Yeah, but I don't know what the
Uh,
score is. Obviously, he represents Germany, doesn't, but I don't know what that criteria is on it.
yeah, I'm just looking now. He was at Arsenal. He joined Arsenal in 2013 and didn't leave for Germany until 2016. So, however old he was for those 3 years, I'm not sure. I have to look into that one. I'm not really sure the reason on that one. But that's an interesting little element to it. But it's just, I don't know. It's just whether it's a deal that makes sense for all parties. It's not one to rule out because he is a top player. I've seen him play. He's amazing. But I do think in an ideal world, despite his age, I think Liverpool would probably like to keep things relatively status quo, not change the squad too much, and maybe get rid of one, possibly two of the traditional Liverpool front three this summer. Whereas if you start getting in, swapping Mane for Gnabry and Firmino also leaves, and Milner and Henderson coming to the end and things like that, you don't want to have too much change when it comes to contingency plans and things like that. So it's one to watch anyway. It's going to be an interesting one. But on the weekend, Liverpool have Chelsea. Another domestic cup final. Liverpool's first FA Cup final in quite a while now. How are you looking at this one?
Sorry, I just turned my mic off while I was coughing. So, yeah, really interesting because, these meetings with certainly Tuchel's Chelsea have been really, really tight. And what actually dawned on me, Josh, is Klopp actually hasn't beaten him yet in 90 minutes, has he, since he's come to England? Well, you can say 120 minutes, I guess. Because obviously the League Cup win was via penalty shootout. And either side of that, I think there's been 2 draws and, or is it 1 draw, 1 defeat? 1 of the 2 anyway. But it's always really, really tight against Chelsea. And I mean, I'm expecting another really tight game. Chelsea seem to bring out their best version of themselves against Liverpool. I think at times they've definitely looked a little bit more vulnerable than we would have expected earlier in the year. More recently, obviously, against Wolves last weekend, they go and lose a 2-goal lead and draw 2-2. But definitely on the whole, they seem to really rise against fixtures versus Liverpool, which means it could be another really tight game on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't tend to enjoy facing Chelsea. I think they're a difficult side to break down, and specifically going forward, they just seem really equipped. I think really capable of exploiting Liverpool's high line / offside trap. It's quite funny that I've just said that because they obviously got done by the offside trap on a number of occasions in the Carabao Cup final. But people still go on about that Lukaku goal and like the 115th minute and whether that was actually offside or not because it was so tight. So you could argue Liverpool maybe got let off the hook there, but just generally, even dating back to when Tuchel first arrived and Liverpool had a few injury issues and we were playing in empty stadiums, even then, I felt that Chelsea were really good at just getting in behind Liverpool's defensive line. And if you look at the squad that they've got, I do think Liverpool can maybe get a bit of comfort from the fact that in midfield, it's looking like it's going to be a duo of Jorginho and Ruben Loftus-Cheek, as opposed to Kovacic and Kante, for example. So, and for the first time, it looks like Thiago is probably going to start against Chelsea, whereas the previous matches we haven't had him. So, there could be a few differences here. But despite saying that, I am still obviously concerned that Liverpool are coming up against Chelsea and in the Carabao Cup final. On balance, I'm not sure who deserved to win that game. Chelsea did have a fair few breaks, scored a fair few goals, albeit they were marginally offside and things. And this is almost a coin flip, this game.
Yeah, I'm just reading up as we're talking now on to see if there was any hint on Kante maybe coming back in. I'm just reading the latest quotes from, well, I think they were a day or 2. He may be in contention by the sounds of it. And the reason I'm flagging him in particular is because obviously he's phenomenal. And last few times I watched him, he's looked at his absolute best again and seems to cause Liverpool's midfield problems. Obviously Liverpool will be without Fabinho as well, won't they? Which is a big blow. Well, I assume they will. Do we know for sure? Yeah.
No, we don't. But I did see something this morning saying he's potentially in contention. So it's just,
okay.
We haven't got a clue on that one, to be honest.
No, yeah. Because I think that midfield battle, the reason we're focusing on it is I think it'll just be really interesting. But if Chelsea are without those two, then it definitely swings it back in Liverpool's favour for me, especially with Thiago playing in there. Yeah, and I expect them to have a few more opportunities than say they had against Spurs. But it'll still be a really tight game, and you are right. They seem to know how to cause that back line, Liverpool's back line issues. Similar to how I thought, at times Villa did a decent job of it as well. From a wider point, Josh, I was watching that Villa game, right, and I was thinking, we know why they play this. It's all about getting high up the pitch, dominant territory, making it really difficult to play out when the ball's turned over. It's clear that it's very successful. But what I would say is, it does feel like a lot of teams get at least one or two opportunities per game that really cause Liverpool problems. And I'll see if I can dig out why I wrote this piece, but I'm sure I wrote a piece recently, and Alisson had faced. I mean, saying this, it sounds
I
wrong. I
think
need to double check it, but I think he's faced the most one-on-ones of any goalkeeper in the Premier League this season.
he has. I know what
Yeah.
you're on about. Yeah,
So I'm
40,
thinking,
47 if I remember correctly.
yeah, I looked at last week. It may be different now, but yeah, say the number may be different, but the ranking isn't. He's faced the most one-on-ones of any Premier League goalkeeper this season. That is a bit of a red flag for me, I'll be honest. Like, I know he's phenomenal at what he does, but yeah, that's a red flag to me. I don't know how you feel about it when you. I assume you must have already seen it.
Yeah, I just wonder how much of it is intentional almost. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be facing 1v1s. That's an obvious. But in terms of how that almost allows Alisson's skill set to shine, I do think he's the best around that I've seen at dominating those 1v1s.
Yeah.
And if Liverpool's approach works, maybe the opposition will get one of them a game. If Liverpool's approach works, if Liverpool's approach is slightly off it, maybe there's two, potentially three. But at times Liverpool can virtually kill their opponents to the extent where they don't create anything. So I don't know. I know exactly what you mean, and I thought Liverpool would get opened up a few times against Spurs. They did, and I think I expected it to happen against Chelsea. But it'd be interesting to ask Klopp: would you still play like that if Alisson wasn't your goalkeeper, and see what his response would be? But it does all coincide with attacking football, high defensive line, offside trap. So it's not. I'm not. If you was going to change it to avoid those things, you could almost end up becoming worse.
Yeah, it would have a domino effect, wouldn't it? The way I concluded when I was just thinking about it when I was watching this Villa game was because you do kind of role play having these conversations with Klopp, for example, and being like, you know what, are you ever concerned about that? And the way I did conclude it was, I imagine he'd say something like, well, to have all of this, everything we talk about in terms of going forward, dominating the ball, dominating territory, to have all that, you've got to have something as a consequence, and that is this slight vulnerability to balls over the top, played in behind, that, if attackers time the run right, they tend to get through in on goal. But as a contingency, we have what we believe to be, the best shot stopper in the division, possibly in Europe, and we're confident that he'll get us out of the situation more times than not, and his record would signify that he does.
I suppose these types of games are the games that you're mildly concerned about, maybe, because Alisson's obviously facing 1v1s against top players. The likes of Son Heung-min is a top finisher that I've flagged before. Harry Kane is the same. Mason Mount generally plays very well against Liverpool. Lukaku, I know he hasn't had the best season, but Lukaku can put the ball in the net. We know all about his quality. So it's in these big games that I suppose the risk versus reward of letting Alisson face these 1v1s is a bit more controversial, maybe. But then at the same time, it all just kind of allows Liverpool to play in such an offensive way. And you could argue these top teams, like the likes of Chelsea, aren't used to being attacked in this way. Like Klopp is just relentless with his selection of a back four. It's just, I don't think he's off the top of my head, I don't think he started in any Liverpool game with a back five. Not once. Not that a back five is or a back three or whatever you want to call it is necessarily defensive. It comes back to how he lived the formation, really. But I think it's just testament to how Klopp has just wedded to being attacking across the board. That his only ever moves towards back fives have been tactical towards the end of a game or something like that. Everton Liverpool do it. Pep Linders has talked about this. Everton in training, every training session he does has to coincide with the principle of we are an attacking team, at heart. I think Ronald Koeman said something about that a few years ago, that the only truly attacking coach out there is Jurgen Klopp, because he attacks with like 8 players, and it's just it's quite mad. But in these games, maybe you have to be a bit more balanced, and against these types of teams, those 1v1s can obviously hurt you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm conscious of sounding too negative. Definitely not. It's just about painting that whole picture, isn't it? But like, the good news is Chelsea haven't really looked themselves, have they, these last few weeks? I'm just having a quick look at the record now, and yeah, they've only won 2 of the last 6 matches. And they've had one day less to prepare for the final because they played against Leeds last night on Wednesday night. They kind of give up that 2-goal lead against Wolves, didn't they? Lost to Everton, so they do. And for the first time as well, I've heard Tuchel leaning a little bit on excuses, saying things like, the club ownership problems are causing a little bit of disruption for the team. It's having a clear impact. Players like Rudiger, who's been so important for them, it's already been revealed he's going to leave at the end of the season and go to Real Madrid. So, the point I'm trying to make is, I think, compared to when the sides met in the Carabao Cup final, I don't think things look as rosy as they were then compared to now. Chelsea do look a little bit more broken, I guess, as a club, and Tuchel's kind of set up as well.
One player who does seem to look marginally himself lately is Lukaku, funnily enough. He's played 90 minutes, 2 games in a row, or 89 minutes against Wolves. Scored 2 against Wolves, and yesterday night scored 1 against Leeds. So it's going to be interesting to see if Lukaku starts. I'm not sure if I would actually rather him start or not, because he is a threat in transition. He can certainly finish moves. Based on the Carabao Cup final, he probably scores one of the opportunities that Chelsea had if he'd have played. But then he is prone to become disconnected with the team. So that's going to be an interesting one to look at. I'm not sure whether I even want him to start or not, really.
Do you think Liverpool are a better opponent for him to start against? Right, because just for the reasons you've laid out there. I think his issues have been in a dominant side, hasn't it, against teams where there's not much space to exploit. But obviously, if Liverpool are going to be exploited, if Chelsea are going to exploit anyone, they'll have a chance with Liverpool on the break.
Yeah, well, Lukaku's he's always been painted as this target man, and that's understandable considering he's like 6'3", and he's stronger than most centre halves. But then when it comes to that, it's not his game. I think I have always felt his game is almost in transition, and some of his best performances I can remember over the years. I can remember 2 right off the top of my head. One of them was for Everton against Arsenal when he played on the right, was he? And the other one was for Belgium against Brazil, when again he played on the flanks. And I just think it captures how he's almost a counter-attacking player despite his size. And when he's playing part of a possession-based team, he doesn't seem to shine as much. Another player, funnily enough, who was similar, and I'm going to divert the convo here away from the FA Cup final. I'm going to leave that one there because I've just thought of an extra talking point that we just have to touch upon. Is Erling Haaland. Obviously, he's now agreed to join Manchester City. What are your thoughts?
Was that hugely disappointed from you?
That was supposed to be an overemphasized sigh. That was Again, there we go. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, well, look, the immediate obvious thought is we've talked about him a lot, kind of clinical, elite goal scorer, still just 21, a bit of a kind of, I mean this in a really nice way, but a bit of a freak of nature, in terms of his physical profile, ticks many boxes. Yeah, I can understand why Liverpool, from a Liverpool point of view, it's hugely disappointing. The only thing, though, Josh, I would say, and I'm sure you'll go back onto the positives before we go on to any negatives, but he's had a lot of injury issues this year. He's
Yeah.
missed a fair few games.
Well, that was going to be, I suppose, the positive angle on it. Not that it's positive, really. It's a nasty thing, really, isn't it? But when it comes to competition in the division and Liverpool maybe not suffering at the hands of this player, yeah, he has picked up a fair few knocks, and they're not major ones, are they? The little annoying ones that
Mm,
maybe Naby Keita has picked up,
mm,
that maybe Daniel Agger picked up during his prime years at Liverpool. Those types of things, and I do think you've just labelled him there as a freak of nature. I agree with you. And I think almost when you've got players that are like that, they're almost prone to those types of issues,
mm,
purely because of their physical construction almost. Like
yeah.
Adama Traore, for example, is another one who's probably a bit of a freak of nature in terms of his build and stuff like that. He's publicly claimed to have never worked out in the gym, which is insane.
What a
But
lucky man.
he's had a number of issues with dislocating the shoulder. It just seems to happen fairly regularly. And I'm no expert when it comes to the medical side of things, but Haaland looks like another type of player who, because he's so almost physically perfect, he naturally encounters the odd little issue or something. That's a bit of a
Mm,
weird one.
mm.
But aside from that, it's hard to nail how this deal could go wrong, really.
Yeah, that's it. You'd almost feel if he stays on the pitch, then he's going to be lethal and a big asset for City. I know you could potentially look at Chelsea and Lukaku and say, look, there's no guarantee that you put a great striker in a team and they're successful. I get that, but I think City are absolute masters of working themselves into an opposition's penalty area, cutting the ball back to attackers in the middle, and that's absolutely perfect for Haaland. So, we might get our eye wide, but prediction wise, I think he's going to be a huge success there. And his age, you could have for 5 or 6 years of him and then sell him in his prime for at least getting your money back. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of the past 3 seasons, he's overperformed XG in the Bundesliga by 12.5 goals. So that suggests he's at the very least a good finisher. And if you look at just his stylistic makeup, he can kind of play any brand of football, really, when it looks like that way anyway. It looks like he can counter attack. It looks like he can score headers. It looks like he can pose a threat from set pieces. It looks like he can poach. He looks like he can fight. He's 6'4", I think. He's a threat in behind. So he does look like a complete. He looks like a machine, doesn't he? He looks like something like a lab construction. What I think one thing I do have to flag is his biggest pick in Germany has been on the transition. He does benefit from wide open spaces in the Bundesliga, counter attacking, through balls and behind. Just because of the makeup of City and the dominance of City, that should happen less. So I don't think he will benefit from that as much. Which is, I mean, he's got Kevin De Bruyne feeding him, so you never know. But
Yeah. I
that's
think,
one little thing that I think he will
yeah.
maybe have to get used to.
Well, it was like Grealish, isn't it, really? Grealish just went from largely being a player who was most dangerous, picking the ball up in transition, getting a lot of the ball and kind of running. And, Grealish is ironically still getting the same amount of touches per 90 as he was getting available. It's just he's getting them in completely different scenarios, isn't he? And I think that's why he's not being as good as we expected.
Yeah, it really is going to be interesting to see how he's accommodated by Pep. and how he accommodates his own game to fit into this team. And there's the very slight possibility maybe that he almost not breaks the team, but causes a bit of disruption for a short period, like Lukaku has, because he's not a natural fit into a strikerless total football system. He's just kind of the guy at the top who will put the ball in the net for you. And City haven't played with that player for about 2 years now. So it's going to be interesting. I'm not sure how good his link-up game is, personally. I don't know how comfortable he would be drifting into 10 spaces and doing maybe bits of what Aguero was doing. But Pep has worked with Lewandowski, who's very much a penalty box player, and he got the most out of him, really. I mean, I think Lewandowski's actually since done even better than when Pep was there, but it's just difficult to envisage a scenario where Haaland struggles, apart from the early couple of months, maybe when there's a bit of an adjustment period, and hopefully Liverpool can find a way of taking advantage of that potentially. But it's going to be interesting to watch next season, and he's probably going to be in our FPL teams, isn't he?
Yeah, be in the FPL teams, and it makes like it'll make from a Liverpool point of view, it is going to make life a little bit more difficult, isn't it? Because he has potential to add more goals to that team, but look, you never know. You never know, do you?
No. What I will say, I don't think it'll make the league any more one-sided than it is now. I think things will stay fairly similar. There's no way you can start breaching 100 points every season. It'll still be a 95-point mark that we're aiming for. But we don't want to end up on too much of a negative note anyway. It's going to be interesting to see him in the league. Liverpool have top elite opposition to compete with now. Not that they haven't had anyway. And Liverpool have an FA Cup final to win this weekend. So hopefully Liverpool will lift the trophy. And regardless, Liverpool will be in contention for years to come. So nothing to worry about there. Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you, mate. Cheers, everyone.
Yeah, we'll be back next week to hopefully talk about Liverpool winning yet another trophy. So see you then.